Good morning. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Oh,
Good morning.
you don't hear it? No, you do hear
Happy New Year.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Good morning.
Happy New Year. Hey, Jeff.
Good morning.
Hey.
Hi. Rosemary.
You have everybody off to a good start so far? Staying safe?
So far.
There he is.
Can't believe how long it's been. It's overwhelming, and yet it doesn't seem that long, but it is. It's crazy.
It is the curious feature of this year will be the way time moved
Right.
for us. You know,
Yeah.
it's so amazing how all of us have had a little taste of what it's like to be a little taste. I don't want to oversell it, but a little taste of what it's like to be in prison. Not that I've been in prison, but I've spent enough time meeting with people and telling you know, talking to them about time and how time passes when your freedoms are taken away and you're in the same environment most of the time, like we are right now. Yeah, it's a weird thing where time seems to freeze in some ways, but also seems to, that's the dog, and seems to
have a dog.
the dog is now here being happy.
Oh, it's bigger. Oh my gosh.
They get bigger until they stop.
It's not going to get much, I hope not much bigger, but yeah, the
But
dog
let's
is.
see the paws, then we'll know.
Oh, really?
Oh.
Yes, you can tell by the paws. If
Ryder.
the paws are big, the dog will get bigger to fit the paws.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Let's see. Rosemary
I
wants to-
remember when you said no dogs.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
There's that-
Wasn't
lots
that
of
long
us
ago.
have had to change our ways of life.
I did what I do for my children.
Mhm.
I don't know that it
Good
did the trick. I don't know that it did the trick, but it was supposed to help our daughter through quarantining. Yeah. Unfortunately, we lost a few more people this week to COVID, or last week and a half.
Mhm.
We both of them had long lives and had definitely were in the unhealthy, I guess, zone of being over 90, but they were not. They were both healthy. You know, they were both healthy, but relatively, you know, speaking. So neither one were in critical care places anyways. So yeah, it's and all of Tracy's family now, they raised the level to 5 yesterday, which Tracy said she didn't even think there was a 5. They put them on double secret probation yesterday in England. So yeah, they're very, very serious about it there, because it's gotten, you know, they've got this new strain that we're starting to get here too. So please continue to stay safe, everybody. All I can say is we hope you do what you have to do to stay safe, everybody. So wait a couple more seconds. We were off last week. I apologize for a later notice, but we had a family thing we had to take care of, and yeah, it's going to be a long another couple months. Let's put it that way. I think for us and for our country.
Well, I talked to my doctor the other day, and he has no idea how this vaccine is going to work. No idea. They have the state has not contacted Facey or Providence.
Yeah. No, that's not uncommon. That's not Facey. That's most practices, which is, you know, they assume that they'll let the practice, but who knows? I mean, you know, who knows the way it's going to be. Meanwhile, Israel has done about 15% of their country already. And we have people who are going to have vaccines that are going to spoil before they get them. So again, I know Israel's scale is not the same. It's not the same, but, and you can't look just at percentages, but you can look at and you can look at, again, the bigger issue. You never should have vaccines spoiling before they get administered. That's bad. That's bad delivery at the very least. It doesn't really matter what another country does. It's what we are doing.
Now you can go to your dentist and get your shot.
I just think it's interesting that we were turning it over to pharmacies, which I don't care if that works. If that system works, who's to say that's not the right way, but it doesn't seem like we really know. So listen, we hope that there'll be better answers in the coming weeks. I really hope by the end of this month, at least we know how we're going to get it. Tracy's workers are getting, her staff at the different nursing homes are all getting vaccinated. But interestingly, at some of the facilities, people are refusing to get vaccinated. And they don't have a policy in place yet to force people to be vaccinated. They're trying to figure out what to do. And they have horrible outbreaks. The Jewish home in San Francisco that she had, they didn't have any for a long time. And now they have 50, 60 people that are ill with COVID up there now. So 60, I think she said, as of yesterday. So I don't understand. I mean, I don't understand why they can't require it. They require TB tests, but I guess they didn't have it in place for flu type vaccinations. So it's an HR
And
issue.
children are required to have vaccinations before they go to school.
I guess it's an HR policy issue. They don't want to get sued, but they're trying to figure it out. And definitely for seniors, you'd think it was a no-brainer that you could somehow compel people to, but I don't know. I mean, I read some statistic that 50% of healthcare workers in Riverside County or something didn't want to be vaccinated. So give me theirs. I'll get vaccinated in a heartbeat. By the way, I don't know, Reverend Lynn, have they said anything about vaccinations for chaplains and for staff that are part of the Episcopal Church?
No, they're still in the same rota as everyone else. I suppose if you're a primary person, you would be part of that. I know that Kaiser, for example, has vaccinated all of their housekeeping people. And they're working up from housekeeping, so. And
Yeah.
we have friends who are nurses at Henry Mayo, and they've both been vaccinated.
Well, interestingly, I was reading that it was not an article from local papers. It was actually Religious News Service reported that Holy Cross in Mission Hills, they vaccinated their chaplains, which again, I guess hospitals are vaccinating their chaplains, but
Sure.
I wasn't sure whether it was just one it didn't seem like it was just one chaplain. So I don't know the answer, but interestingly, I heard that if I go to Arizona, I can get vaccinated. They have some system there where they're vaccinating volunteers who are helping do the vaccinations, helping facilitating the vaccinations. They're vaccinating the volunteers. So if you go there and you help out for a day, you can get vaccinated. And supposedly they're vaccinating people out of Maricopa. The person who told me lives in Phoenix, and she said even people out of Maricopa County can get vaccinated. It seems kind of strange, but I don't know. I think I'm willing to go to Arizona to get vaccinated.
Isn't that jumping the line?
I don't, if they're asking people to help, look, I'm prepared. I'm already doing funerals. I'm already doing stuff with people who have COVID. I've never turned down anybody during this time. I just don't know what they're going to ask me to do.
You're active clergy. See, I'm retired clergy. I think that makes a big difference.
Maybe, but you still would, if you were called to visit somebody, you probably, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what you do. I mean,
I would go.
I'm in a situation where I haven't turned anyone down yet.
Right.
And I actually did a wedding last week on Friday. I didn't tell anybody. My first thing of the new year, my first day out of the new year, I did a wedding for somebody that's in critical care. They wanted to get married. That was the first thing I did and I was worried about it because I don't have, I mean, I haven't tested positive or anything, but I was worried, but the person was already critical. Anyways, these kind of things, as far as transmitting disease to people, that's my biggest concern. Is I don't want it. I'm less concerned with getting it than I am transmitting it. I've already said that before.
Nobody knows whether the vaccine will keep you from transmitting it. That's what they keep saying.
Right.
I know.
It
That's
seems like
right.
it would, but nobody knows.
I know. I've heard different things, and I'll do what, I'll do what the medical professionals tell me to do. But I'll tell you this: I haven't, people have told me that they're not doing funerals right now. Like, I don't understand how you can refuse to do a funeral, but
Rabbi, not to sound horrible, but there was a clergy in Arizona went up to see a hospice patient, and he got COVID and passed away on, I think, January 1st or 2nd. So you guys got to be careful.
really,
Yeah. He was from Chandler area. He drove up to Kingman because they don't really have a hospice people up there. And he went to see a patient. He came back, started to feel sick around Christmas time, and he passed away.
yeah, that's
So you don't know if they're underlying issues.
that's not
Yeah.
that's not good to hear. But yeah, like I said, I'm a little less concerned with it. I just people were asking me around the country. I had rabbis that were asking me about the higher vision story made national news. So I had a lot of people asking me about that, and I was, yeah, that's our community.
Are they
But-
the same people who are every Saturday out in front of the sheriff's station?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think this was it could be an overlap, but those people were those people. Some of those people were from out of state, so I guess it made people were focusing on the fact that there was people from all around the country. Well, I don't know all around the country, but out of state. They were at the Higher Vision Church for that, and then other people said they didn't see stories about it. I said it made national news. I don't understand how you just found out about it on social media. It was on the news, but whatever. I
It
don't
was
know.
in the LA Times for a couple of days.
The LA Times for a couple of days, but it was on national. I mean, somebody sent me a story from
Right.
Florida. They heard about it, so whatever. I think it made our community look not good, to put it mildly. It was very selfish, and then of course there was a picture of somebody blowing a shofar in the picture, and people were sending me that. I'm like, wasn't me. I don't know. It was crazy. I don't. The person wasn't Jewish, but a shofar seems to me to be like a super spreader device. If you want to get people sick, blowing a shofar. That's like the best way to get as many people sick as possible. I was blowing in a shofar. Yeah, no, I don't.
And we don't know the fallout from that gathering, from that rally.
And I don't think they care. I really, that's the problem. I
I
don't
don't
think.
think they do either.
Well, I will tell you that every other year they invite me over to Master's College to teach a class and on comparative religions and on Judaism. And I went a couple months ago, and I said, "You guys are in session?" They said, "Yeah, we're in session. We're all social distancing. We're wearing masks." And they were, and it wasn't the worst thing I've seen during COVID times, but it was pretty interesting to know that there's a college in our midst that's in session. I mean, it shouldn't surprise you that it's Masters, but there's a college in session. So, yeah, they told me they were going to take everyone's temperature, and I kind of felt, I almost said no because I didn't want to encourage people to be in college, but on the other hand, I said, look, this is their one opportunity, their entire time in college, to talk about, for me to talk about Judaism, to give another standpoint. And I said, look, if I don't do it, who will? And that was in November. So I was, needless to say, I'm okay. But yeah, there's a college in session in our midst. Obviously COC and CalArts aren't, but the Masters is. They believe they're protected. So anyways,
The
but
Times had an article, or at least the thing I get from the Times every day, about how many workers like at Costco and Target and all these different places that have been infected.
yeah, well,
So it's
the
like,
whole Singerman family got sick. I mean, they're all okay. They all were cleared and everything. Not the whole family, but everyone who lives in the house. Brooke, Marissa, Jonathan, and Sandy. They got it probably because Brooke works at at Lowe's. Sorry.
oh,
So
they mentioned.
They're all
who, but I
frontline
didn't mention-
workers.
Yeah,
yeah.
wow.
Anyways, yeah, it is really I feel really bad for those guys working in the grocery stores and the women who were men and women who were there, and they're talking about giving them hazard pay, and I think they deserve it. I mean, I don't know what else to say. I'd give it to them.
Rabbi Andy actually was exposed by his girlfriend. He also works at Bonds.
Yeah, but did he get it?
Well, that's what he was. Like I said, he was exposed, but he just got tested the other day, and I just heard from my sister while we were talking that he did not get it, and so he can go, but he can get out of his room. My sister said, because my sister wouldn't let him out of the room, and he can go back to work.
Andy's a front line at a grocery store.
Yeah.
Danny Kaplan, Mark's son, Danny, younger son, Danny's now working at Ralph's over by us. Yeah, those a lot of them are kids too. Hopefully they'll be stronger, but dang, I mean, those kids are on the literally on the front lines right now. They're exposed constantly. So, but I'll tell you, the nursing homes right now, folks, are just really, really, really bad. Some of the ones that made it through, like Oakmont out by us, made it through pretty well until about a month ago, and now Oakmont is just it's a disaster, absolute disaster there. I can't even imagine how horrific it is. I don't want to think about it. It's just horrific. I mean, literally like 70% of the people have gotten sick there now. And that's a lot of the people that are at Henry Mail right now are from Oakmont, from the other nursing homes. So anyways, with that, let's keep safe and hopefully get through the next couple of weeks. Actually, that's a good segue. We weren't there last week, but we looked at Moses. Moses almost got killed by angel, but at least by the Midrash. The Midrash's version of Exodus chapter 4 is that he got attacked by an angel, or two angels in this case, and they attacked him. And Zipporah, according to the Torah, saves him. But and this is kind of where we left off in the Midrash. Trying to explain this story, which again is such a confusing story in the Torah. The Midrash does a adequate job maybe of explaining it, but it doesn't really add much to our understanding other than, again, in the Torah it says God attacked him, and in the Midrash it says an angel or angels attacked him. And what's interesting in the Midrash is I don't know if we got to this part. I'm pretty sure we got right around here. It says, when Moses was released by the angels, he attacked them. He slew Hema, whose host of angels held their own before the assailant, meaning Moses. And so
An angel.
what?
I said, I didn't think they could die.
Well, these are angels that, again, seem to be not the angels that you and I maybe would recognize as eternal divine beings, images of God that we have in other parts of the Bible. These seem to be a little bit more like demigods or creations on that that have a finite span of time, divine beings, but not necessarily immortal beings. And you sometimes see that in the Midrash in certain places, especially again where you have angels being afraid of Moses or other heroes in the Bible because they feel powerless compared to them in some ways. And so it's an interesting it's an interesting idea that these angels are not exactly perfect, immortal, and all, kind of just being a part of God. Interesting, by the way. And again, I don't know how many of you have seen the new Pixar Soul movie that came out. A lot of people are talking about the Jewish aspects of that movie, especially, again, I don't want to ruin it for anybody, but especially when it comes to angels and souls and spirit. And so I encourage you to watch it. I mean, because it does deal with this kind of a Jewish idea that there are souls that are waiting to come into the world, and that there's that souls are kind of watched over or guarded over by angels before and after they come into the world. So that is definitely part of what angels do. But in this midrash, it's following the Torah description of the attack on Moses. And so I think the rabbis really felt better with angels doing that kind of dirty work, if you will, than God. So the Torah is it's a very weird story. The rabbis don't really feel comfortable with it because they don't understand the context. They clearly don't really understand the context of that story. And it's just a couple lines. So it doesn't really, there's not enough information for the rabbis really to even base it on, because it's almost like it doesn't even belong. And so they don't really know what to do with it, but they can't ignore it. You cannot ignore that story. And so they give us a couple of lines, and that's what we just read. There's a couple of versions of it. We already read one, and then we read one a few weeks ago, and then we read this one. We read this one last. So it says Moses killed them. But now we're going to read about Moses and Aaron and the reunification of Moses and Aaron. Because the Torah doesn't really talk about Moses and Aaron's relationship at all before they start working together. We really don't know what the relationship was like, which is why we have some movie versions where they seem to get along right away, kind of the Ten Commandments version. And then we have the Prince of Egypt version where they don't get along right away. And there's some animosity between them. We don't really get anything in the Torah at all about their relationship. The Midrash definitely has different takes on this. And we're going to read some of them now. So, Rosemary, if you want to start, I think we're here at the divine voice heard by Moses.
Okay. The divine voice heard by Moses in Midian, telling him to return to his brethren in Egypt, fell at the same time upon the ear of Aaron, dwelling in Egypt, and it bade him go into the wilderness to meet Moses. God speaks marvelously with his voice, and therefore the same revelation could be understood one way in Midian and another way in Egypt.
Yeah, so I just want to point out, this is a really tight little small midrash, but there's a really interesting lesson here, of course, which is, of course, you could say that God had two revelations, two different times that he spoke, one to Moses and one to Aaron. But the midrash here goes a different way, which is that God spoke at one time, but simultaneously got understood differently by two different people, which is that the difference with the way God speaks to the way a human speaks is that human beings hear God differently, and the same words or the same utterance is understood differently by different people, which, if you think about it, is really quite a powerful idea, which is that when God speaks, or when we understand God, even in the same moment, not 5 years later, but in the same moment, if you and I heard God, we'd hear different things. God would speak to us differently at that moment, which again then begs the question, when everybody heard God at Mount Sinai, why would they have heard the same voice? They would have heard, the voice would have sounded differently. I mean, the words are the same words according to the Torah that they heard at Mount Sinai. We heard at Mount Sinai, but the voice itself might have sounded different. So it's kind of, if you think about it, it's a really powerful, beautiful idea, which is that God doesn't sound the same to everybody. And even the message might not be exactly the same. Not just the word, not just that the voice is different, but that the words are different. The word told one person to go one direction and the other person to go in the opposite direction so that they would meet. It's kind of a, if you think about it, it's a simple but really powerful idea that God can be understood differently, but people arrive at the same place. So kind of a simple but really beautiful idea. But here they meet, and here's what happens.
The greeting of the two brothers was very cordial. Envy and jealousy had no place between them. Aaron was rejoiced that God had chosen his younger brother to be the Redeemer of Israel. And Moses was rejoiced that his older brother had been divinely appointed the high priest in Israel. God knew their hearts, for at the time when he charged him with the Egyptian mission, Moses had said, "All these years Aaron has been active as a prophet in Israel, and should I now encroach upon his province and cause him vexation?" But God reassured him, saying, "Moses, your brother Aaron will surely not be vexed. He will rather rejoice at your mission. Yes, he will come forth and meet you."
Yeah, well, listen to that for a second. So first of all, the rabbis asked the question, did Aaron feel jealous? Well, why would he feel jealous? Well, first of all, he's the older brother. He's 3 years older. So it would be natural for him to be jealous because he's the older brother. So there's that. Moses was younger. Well, that's an obvious one. Now the rabbis threw something else here, which we haven't really discussed, other than the fact that we knew that, or we've heard that Moses' father was a prophet working in Egypt, Amram. The question was, what did Aaron do all these years? And according to the Midrash, he was working as a prophet. He was actually doing work at that whole time. So, according to this, Aaron is actually a prophet in his own right already, and has been working. And now Moses is coming along, stealing the spotlight. So that's another reason why Aaron wouldn't like to see Moses. So there's the question of what Aaron did. And according to this, Aaron was working. Hold on a second. Trying to mute the phone. Hold on a second. Sorry. Okay. Okay, Rosemary, I'm gonna unmute you. All right. So Aaron, according to this, is gainfully employed as a leader of the people already. That's an interesting one that you may not have known because the Torah doesn't tell us what Aaron was doing. What else happens here with this meeting?
Aaron showed his joy freely at seeing his brother once more after their separation of many years. As for his joy in the distinction accorded to Moses, it was too great to be expressed in all its depth and extent. For his kind, generous spirit, he received a reward from God, in that he was permitted to bear the Urim and Thummim upon his heart. For, God said, "The heart that rejoiced at the exalting of a brother shall wear the Urim and Thummim."
Yeah, and so again, the Urim and Thummim are the divine magic 8 ball that allows the people to know what God wants them to do. We don't know exactly what they look like. We assume that they were some kinds of either dye or something that threw out, rolled, or put out that gave people answers. Some people say this Urim and Tumim were maybe multi-sided decahedron dice that would have had all the Hebrew letters. And so Aleph and Taf would have been Urim and Tumim, but we're really not sure. The root for the words are light and purity. We don't really know they are, but they were mentioned in the Torah, and they're part of the priestly vestments and accoutrement of being a priest, the high priest. You got to use those things. We don't know what happened to him either, by the way. We don't know exactly how they disappeared, but they were divine gifts. And so, according to this Midrash, Aaron earned their right for them because of his lack of envy, and he got to put them over his heart. Again, they were maybe kept there when he wasn't using them, and then maybe they were by the breastplate, and then he would pull them out when they were needing an answer, and he would consult them. We don't really know. We do know, by the way, of course, that they're on the crest of Yale University. The words Urim and Tumim are there on the Yale crest, which is a kind of a testament to the importance of Hebrew in the Bible at Yale. But what's interesting, that those were the Hebrew words chosen, kind of mystical knowledge. That's Yale's Urim and Tumim connection. So Aaron earns them for that. And here's this great meeting. This is not in the Torah, this part at all. But it again begs the question, what was Aaron's reaction to seeing his brother? Okay.
Aaron ran to meet his brother and embraced him and asked him where he had spent all the years of their separation. When he was told in Midian, he continued to question him, saying, "Who are these that are traveling with you?" "Moses, my wife, and my sons." Aaron, "Where are you going with them?" Moses, "To Egypt." Aaron, "What? Great enough is our sorrow through those who have been in Egypt from the beginning, and you take more to the land?" Moses recognized that Aaron was right, and he sent his wife and his sons back to his father-in-law Yitro.
Okay, pause right there. So this answers the question, how did his family how were they no longer with him? We know they were no longer with him because Yitro reunites them back again in chapter 19 of Exodus. We don't know what happened to them. We don't know why they're not with them, but we know they're not with them. And so according to the Midrash, it's Aaron who convinces Moses not to have them with him. And he basically says, look, we got enough problems here. We have enough service here. Our people are suffering. Why would you bring people into this? Why would you bring other Jews into this environment? Get them out of here. And so Moses basically sends them back before they even get there. They don't even get to Egypt. They're already on their way back. And according to this, safe and sound, and not in Egypt. But again, that means that Moses' family isn't there when all these miracles are going to happen. They're not there for the redemption. And they missed out on a major part of the Jewish experience, if you will, that the people of those generations lived with. I mean, so you have to think, what are the consequences of Moses' children not being a part of this? Aaron's children were, meaning Aaron's sons, Nadav, Avihu, Eleazar, and Itamar, they're there. Moses' kids, well, let's assume that they're younger. Yeah, we know they're younger, but, well, we don't know that for sure, but we would assume that Aaron had kids before. Moses was already in Midian when he has his kids, but whatever. The point is that It might explain a little bit why Moses' family really don't make appearances in the Bible. They've been left out of this formative experience of the Exodus. They were not there for the plagues. They were not there for any of the hardships. You could make the argument that the whole Israelite slavery experience, they don't understand it. They don't live it. And there's a midrash or two in that. There's a midrash or two in the experience of the great Redeemer not having a family that experiences the redemption with them. They're there in Mount Sinai, so they're there for that. They're not there for the plagues. They're not there for the crossing of the Red Sea. So what was life like for Moses' family the rest of the journey? Did people look at them and say, you don't understand, you weren't there? And what did they feel like? Did they feel like they missed out on that experience? It's an interesting thing to think about. But according to this, it's Aaron himself who says, don't bring the kids down here. So now what's Moses feel like when he sees his brother?
He was no less magnanimous than Aaron. If the elder brother felt no envy on account of the younger brother's dignity, the younger brother did not withhold from the other the teachings and revelations he had received. Immediately after meeting with Aaron, Moses told him all that God had taught him, even the awful secret of the ineffable name communicated to him on Mount Horeb.
Now, Mount Horeb, of course, is Mount Sinai, is the same mountain, according to what we read, which is where Moses saw God at the burning bush. It's the same mountain that they're going to get the Ten Commandments on. But here it was interesting is that Moses was given these insights to God, including what God's name is, there at Horeb, and Moses tells it all to Aaron. He gives him all the information, all the secrets. He doesn't hold anything back. He doesn't say, you know what, maybe that's just for me. God just told me, I'm not going to tell my brother. He actually tells him everything. He shares it all with them. And so that's not in the Torah. It doesn't say that he did that. But it paints this picture of Moses being not protective of his knowledge and not trying to use that inner knowledge, inner workings of God, what he saw in heaven and hell, what we read about, the secrets that he got. He doesn't hold them back. He tells Moses, he tells Aaron, Moses tells Aaron everything. So here's what happens next after Aaron. So now the Torah does tell us that Moses and Aaron talk to the people before they talk to Pharaoh. Here's what happens. This is the Midrash's description of that meeting. That first meeting, not with Moses and Aaron and Pharaoh, but with the people. What happened then?
In obedience to the command of God, the elders of the people were assembled, and before them Moses performed the wonders that were to be his credentials as the Redeemer sent to deliver the people. Nevertheless, the deeds he did were not so potent in convincing them of the reality of their mission as the words wherein God had announced the approaching redemption to him, which he repeated in their ears. The elders knew that Jacob had imparted to Joseph the secret mark designating the Redeemer, and Joseph had in turn confided it to his brethren before his death. The last surviving one of the brethren, Asher, had revealed it to his daughter, Sarah, in the following words: "He that will come and proclaim the redemption with the words of God, I have surely visited you and seen that which is done to you in Egypt. He is the true Redeemer." Sarah was still alive at Moses' return, and the elders took themselves to her and told her the words of Moses announcing the redemption. When she heard that his words had been the same as those Asher had quoted, She knew that he was the promised Redeemer, and all the people believed in him.
So this is a wonderful midrash. When we talk about ancient feminist midrash, Sarah is this woman that we really don't know much about, other than she's mentioned in the Torah as one of the descendants of Jacob, one of the people that's living in Egypt. And so the rabbis had this wonderful launching off point, which is, who is this woman? Why is she mentioned? What role does she have to play? Why is she mentioned? And so they went with this great collection of stories. We've seen a couple already about Sarah, that she is the wise woman of ancient knowledge. And so she does great things. We'll read another one coming up that she does, but she's the last one alive. Sarah is the last person who knew Jacob, her grandfather. She knew him, and she's still alive. So she's got all this ancient wisdom, and she's the one who knows the secret words. So Moses has these miracles, right, that he shows. God gave him those 3 miracles before we get the plagues, right? Moses is told, here's your staff, it's going to turn into a snake. Here's your hand, stick it in your clothes, it comes out. It's got leprosy, it's got skin disease on it. You put it back in, it comes out, you don't have it. And then, of course, you have this other ability to turn the Nile into blood. That's not even like necessarily, you'd say, the first plague is something that he can do without God. Like, he could have done that anytime, according to the Torah. That's one of his tricks to do anytime he wants. He can turn the Nile to blood. So he has these abilities, he has these miracles, these wonders he can do, but they don't convince the people. The people are like, so what? They look at him and like, okay, the Egyptians probably have people who could do these kind of things, and they're right. So they don't believe it. They don't buy it. It's only because he has the password. He has the ancient password that's hundreds of years old. Only the real Redeemer would know those words. And the only person who knows that is Sarah. The only person alive who can verify it is this woman. She's the key. She's the key to Moses proving his powers, his leadership, the fact that he is who he says he is. So Sarah is not just some random woman who's still alive, who's miraculously old. She is the key to helping Moses prove it. And the Torah doesn't say that. It doesn't say that Sarah stood up and said, he's the guy. But the Midrash does. And the Midrash tells us that that's why she was mentioned. Why she's listed is because she had this role to play here at the critical moment. So it's really cool that this woman, who again, we don't really know anything about other than had this name that we're given. The rabbis built a series of legends about her, that she was this, this fount of ancient wisdom and critical information. You'll see what she does later on too. So that's Sarah.
I have to say that nobody would know whether she was telling the truth or not.
Yeah, but that's the thing. You're right. But they knew her. They knew her. So they trusted her. That's part of the conceit here, was that everybody knows Sarah. She's the one who can verify that Moses is who he says he is. I mean, the weird thing is that Moses doesn't have any credibility based on his father or based on the fact that he's the guy who killed the Egyptian long time ago. None of that matters. And the things that he does, his wonders, don't even matter. It's Sarah who confirms him, which means that she was so important to the narrative, or again, to the way the rabbis imagined the leaders. Who were the leaders of the people during the Egyptian captivity? She's one of them. It's a very well-known midrash, and it's not the only one about her. And so this idea that there was this woman who had this role to play is very interesting. And it's not an uncommon kind of theme in Midrash, where you'll have a woman who, has this ancient wisdom. And I was just going to share, there's I think a really cool Christian example, which I think is really based on this story. Let me just bring this up. So there's a woman in the Christian Bible, and interestingly, not in the most Jewish gospel versions, arguably of the narrative gospels, Luke is the one that's least Jewish. But let me just show you this line from Luke. I just shared it up here. It says in Luke chapter 2, there was also a prophet, Anna, the daughter of Phanuel, of the tribe of Asher. She was very old. She had lived with her husband 7 years after her marriage, and then was a widow until she was 84. She never left the temple, but worshiped night and day, fasting and praying. Coming up to them at that very moment, she gave thanks to God and spoke about the child, all who were looking forward to the redemption of Jerusalem. Do you notice some interesting characteristics that sound a lot like the story of Sarah?
Mhm.
Hello? She's really old. Really old. The Christian Bible actually says really old, very old. They also kind of like this idea that she was kind of, we don't get this with Sarah stories, but that she was kind of like a widow for a really long time. She was like not doing the normal woman kind of stuff. She was kind of holy, like, I won't say a nun, but she's kind of like a holy virgin lady. She's been alone for a long time. But here's the critical thing. She was from the tribe of Asher. She's from the same tribe as Sarah. Sarah is Asher's daughter. She's many, many, many generations later. She's from the same tribe. So I think that Midrash is, you can see sometimes when it appears in slightly variant forms in Christian text, you can see how important it was, because, gosh, I don't know what to say other than, Wikipedia here doesn't say anything about it, but I didn't invent this. I'm not the first person to notice that Anna sounds a whole lot like Sarah. And again, you can see that in some churches, there's a day for her, right? February 3rd, in the Byzantine rite of the Catholic Church, she's got a feast. So she's there. So I like those when they pop up in not just, that wasn't a Christian midrash. Well, say it was a Christian midrash, but that's in the Gospels. The story of Sarah is in our midrash, but there it's a canonical text. It's a Christian text. Anna, you can't say Anna, we don't know whether Anna existed or not. The Christian Bible says she did. All right. Again, I don't want to make a huge difference between Midrash and Torah, because there are people who say the Midrash is Torah too in our community. But anyways, that's a little bit of feminist Midrash too. That's one of the things that's exciting about that Midrash too, is that it shows that women do have an important place in the Midrash. So here we go.
Thereupon Moses invited the elders to go to Pharaoh with him, but they lacked the courage to appear before the king. Though they started out with Moses, they dropped off stealthily on the way, one by one, and when Moses and Aaron stood in the presence of the king, they found themselves alone, deserted by all the others. The elders did not go out free. Their punishment was that God did not permit them to ascend the holy mountain with Moses. They dared accompany him on the way to God only as far as they had accompanied him on the way to Pharaoh, and then they had to tarry until he came again.
Yeah, so the elders not quite as faithful as Aaron. As you'd expect from a larger group of people, not quite as faithful and as reliable, as loyal. And so again, we know that Moses and Aaron were kind of on their own a little bit. They didn't have the backing maybe of the rest of the community. Maybe they wanted them to succeed, but as far as sticking their necks out, probably not doing that. It's not usually a very popular job being a prophet. And so Moses and Aaron probably found themselves alone a lot, is the point of that. We know that. I mean, the Torah actually goes on to say that the people kind of turn on them for making their lives harder, but we're not there yet. Kind of there, but and of course we know the mass of people constantly let Moses and Aaron down. But now we're going to read, and we get to this critical part of, and this is kind of the critical piece today. What happens when Moses and Aaron actually come before Pharaoh? Now, the Torah is very descriptive of it. So it's not like the Midrash has to step in and tell us what happens here. But what's interesting is the details that they give us that the Torah doesn't cover. Some of the things that go on here in the Midrash, you kind of wonder why did they do that? But again, it's this question that's underlying everything, which is that of this meeting, could Moses and Aaron really have stepped right in front of Pharaoh? Like, how would that even happen? How do two guys that are like slaves and shepherds, how do these guys get before Pharaoh? So that's a fair question, and the Midrash definitely deals with it. Here we go.
Moses and Aaron before Pharaoh. The day Moses and Aaron made their appearance before Pharaoh happened to be the anniversary of his birth, and he was surrounded by many kings, for he was ruler of the whole world, and this was the occasion on which the kings of the earth came to do him homage. When the attendants announced Moses and Aaron, Pharaoh inquired whether the two old men had brought him crowns, and receiving a negative reply, he ordered that they were not to be admitted to his presence until he had seen and dismissed all the others desirous of paying him their respects.
Yeah, so part of the story is they came on the day that people were coming in front of Pharaoh anyways. So they came on his birthday, and everyone's bringing him gifts. And so when Moses and Aaron come there, Pharaoh says, "Oh, what do they have for me?" And they got some good stuff. He said, "No." "Oh, then let's wait for everybody else, and then we'll bring them in." So there's this idea that they came on a day that Pharaoh was indeed seeing people. So maybe that's part of it, that it was his birthday. It's an interesting idea. Moses' birthday. By the way, you notice how they say the anniversary of his birth. That's an interesting thing, because first of all, obviously for kings, those are holidays. That's still a national holiday in England, is the Queen's birthday. It's actually a holiday. But it also is kind of indicative of something else in the actually up until fairly recently, the whole concept of people having birthdays, like you and I and average people having a birthday, it really, you really do that. The whole concept of somebody having a birthday and people, giving them presents like, you and me and getting cards and things like that. That's a fairly new in the historical spectrum of humanity. That's like a new thing. So you could have just said his birthday. Well, they didn't, because only kings had birthdays. Most people didn't have birthdays, and they didn't. Yeah, they did. It wasn't something they would have just said, "Oh, it was the king's birthday." Didn't do that. The king had a birthday, and that's the only person who did. All right. So, and of course, that's because the king is divine. So, how would Moses and Aaron get into the? How'd they get into the palace?
Pharaoh's palace was surrounded by a vast army. It was built with 400 entrances, 100 on each side, and each of them guarded by 60,000 soldiers. Moses and Aaron were overawed by this display of power, and they were afraid. But the angel Gabriel appeared, and he led them into the palace, observed by none of the guards, and Pharaoh decreed severe punishment upon the inattentive sentinels for having admitted the old men without his permission. They were dismissed and others put in their places. But the same thing happened the next day. Moses and Aaron were within the palace, and the new guard had not been able to hinder their passing. Pharaoh questioned his servants. How had it been possible for the two old men to enter? And they said, "We know it not. Through the doors they did not come. Surely they must be magicians."
Yeah. So in this version of it, yes, there are a lot of guards, but they have an angel, and he gets them in, at least through the palace, not right into Pharaoh, but somehow they got in. Like, how do they even get in? So yeah, so it's not just an angel, it's Gabriel. So Gabriel does the old Jedi mind trick on the palace guards, and they can't.
These aren't the Jews you're looking for.
These aren't the redeemers. These aren't the redeemers you're looking for. And so they walk in. I don't, look, they're asking the question, like, how did Pharaoh ever let them in? I mean, that's the question the Midrash asks, which is a fair question. How did they get in? How did they get in? It doesn't make sense, because the rabbis knew. I mean, they had, in their day, they had Caesars and local provincial kings and local rulers. You couldn't just walk in to see them. They weren't there for you to, visit. And it's the same thing of today. I mean, it's like, you're not going to go up. You're not going to go visit the Queen of England at Buckingham Palace, or Balmoral, wherever she is right now. You can't just walk in and see them. And so they knew that, and they were asking these questions. The rabbi said, "How did they get in?" Here's a slightly different midrash here.
Not enough that the palace was guarded by a host. At each entrance, 2 lions were stationed, and in terror of being torn to pieces, none dared approach the doors, and none could go within until the lion tamer came and led the beasts away. Now Balaam and all the other sacred scribes of Egypt advised that the keepers loose the lions at the approach of Moses and Aaron, but their advice availed not. Moses had but to raise his rod, and the lions bounded toward him joyously and followed at his feet, gamboling like dogs before their master on his return home.
Yeah, so the staff worked magic on those lions too, those palace lions, which we don't know that the Egyptians had lions like that, but the Assyrians did. There's every possibility that there were lions that were kept, around the royal area. It seems kind of dangerous,
We still put statues of lions at our
Yep. And of course, we read in the Midrash about Solomon's throne that had mechanical lions and other animals on it that would attack. They were robot animals that would attack, seemed like a little bit more controllable. But again, Moses's powers through the staff make those lions it's not an issue. So that's another possibility, is that the lions couldn't do anything. Those are all ideas that like magic got them in. But here's another possibility.
Within the palace, Moses and Aaron found 70 secretaries busy with Pharaoh's correspondence, which was carried on in 70 languages. At the sight of the messengers of Israel, they started up in great awe, for the two men resembled angels. Excuse me. The two men resembled angels. In stature, they were as the cedars of Lebanon. Their countenances radiated splendor like the sun. The pupils of their eyes were like the sphere of the morning star, their beards like palm branches, and their mouths emitted flames when they opened them for speech. In their terror, the secretaries flung down pen and paper and prostrated themselves before Moses and Aaron.
Yeah, so in this version of the Midrash, it's a little different, which is that, and they've combined, Ginsburg combines them together, but this version of the Midrash is that you couldn't stop them. They were so clearly divine that there was no stopping Moses and Aaron when they came in. These guys were clearly on a whole nother level. And again, we go back to these Midrashic versions of the story that of who the Pharaoh was and what was going on there, was that, it was the most important empire at the time, which is true, that it was the most important empire during the time of Moses. But going there meant that there were people there, his staff, were people who spoke 70 languages. He had every single, type of the abilities that went on there. They had this office staff that could do anything. They had the comparison today is that, they have they have supercomputers working on, they've got AI and supercomputers when you walk into the place, and everybody is overwhelmed by their power and their knowledge, not just their power, not just their army, but that their courtiers are skilled in, and know all things. So again, they recognize, the staff recognize how powerful Moses and Aaron are. And so they recognize it right away. They don't even have to speak. Just the look of them made the Egyptians stop. So here's what happens when they start talking.
Now the two representatives of the children of Israel stepped before Pharaoh, and they spoke. The God of the Hebrews has met with us. Let us go, we pray you, 3 days' journey into the wilderness, and sacrifice to the Lord our God, lest he fall upon us with pestilence or with the sword. But Pharaoh answered, saying, what is the name of your God? Wherein does his strength consist and his power? How many countries, how many provinces, how many cities has he under his dominion? In how many campaigns was he victorious? How many lands did he make subject to himself? How many cities did he capture? When he goes to war, how many warriors, riders, chariots, and charioteers does he lead forth? Whereto?
So wait a second. So Pharaoh's question to Moses was essentially, again, and the Torah gives us a version of this, but here it's even more poetic, which is, what does your God do? I'm powerful. I basically control the world. What does your God do? Who is your God beaten? Now, of course, he's setting himself up. He's setting himself up perfectly, because of course God is going to destroy you. His victorious campaign God's first victory, if you will, is going to be against you, Pharaoh. You who says, you have dominion over everything. God's going to have dominion over you. But here is the way of Pharaoh, like a king of those days would have said, which is, what's your God done? I haven't heard of your God. Your God hasn't done anything. Your God's done nothing. And so Moses is now, and again, this is the Midrash's version of it, though the Torah version again sets up Pharaoh saying, I don't know your God. But here, it's not just I don't know your God, is that your God doesn't do anything. I and my God, and me being the embodiment of the God of Egypt, of Ra, I do everything. I can beat anybody. So here's Moses' answer and Aaron's answer. Remember, Moses and Aaron, their answer.
Whereto Moses and Aaron replied, his strength and his power fill the whole world. His voice hews out flames of fire. His words break mountains into pieces. The heaven is his throne and the earth his footstool. His bow is fire. His arrows are flames. His spears, torches. His shield, clouds. And his sword, lightning flashes. He created the mountains and the valleys. He brought forth spirits and souls. He stretched out the earth by a word. He made the mountains with his wisdom. He forms the embryo in the womb of the mother. He covers the heavens with clouds. At his word, the dew and the rain descend earthward. He causes plants to grow from the ground. He nourishes and sustains the whole world, from the horns upon the ram down to the eggs of vermin. Every day he causes men to die, and every day he calls men into life.
Wow. So that's a pretty powerful description of God that Moses and Aaron just laid on Pharaoh. And what's really beautiful about it, if you think about it, is first of all, they're speaking to a pagan. They're speaking to a guy who his version of gods are manifold, and they determine who's the most powerful God oftentimes by which God can kill which God. And that was part of the Egyptian pantheon, was which God can kill which God. And so that's how Pharaoh starts. Pharaoh starts off saying, how powerful is your God? What does your God do? What wars does your God win? And what's interesting is that they start off with, oh yeah, he's powerful. His power is so immense that, like, the things that you see when you watch lightning and thunder and you watch volcanoes explode, that's God. Our God is made the planet, not just, conquering different parts of the planet, the whole planet. He forced it into existence. He created it, and with power. But then they step back. And what God does is God creates life. It's one thing to say your God is more powerful because he can do more destruction. But our God actually brings life into the world. And it's a really beautiful, well, yeah, that's what God can do when God gets angry, or God wants to force and be powerful. But look what happens when God wants to be merciful, and God wants to be life affirming and life creating, life generating, making dew fall on the ground, making life start inside a mother. These are acts of gentleness and kindness in life. And it finishes with, yeah, God causes people to die, but more importantly, every day people are created. And that's what makes God different than your concept of God. A God that is only powerful because he can win wars or destroy is not what our God does. This is a God that's going to change the world, because it's not just a God of power. It's also a God of life. And that's the, you could argue, was the revolutionary concept of Judaism, of Jewish theology, was that it was all part of the same God. That's what made Judaism different, was saying, no, there aren't different gods. That God that created the universe and forced the universe into existence and creates volcanoes also helps facilitate the tiniest little bug egg. Let's just say bug, the egg of the bug, a bug you can't even see. The egg of the bug you can't even see. That's God too. God is in that single cell. So that's what's so cool about this little midrashic poem, if you will. It's not a poem, but it's a little piece here that is and it's, you know, and it, on its face of it, what it's really doing is explaining how Jewish theology is different. And when it was written, there were still people worshiping gods. It was still coming out of an environment where a lot of people would have thought, well, okay, I understand you have one God, but is that really all you've got? You've really only got one God? That's it. The Re'im, by the way, the Re'im is the huge, giant, land animal that is also one of these divine beings like the Leviathan. So the horns of the Re'im are like huge. They're giant horns. So giant things and also little tiny things. They're all part of God. So here's Pharaoh's response.
You scroll some more?
Yeah. Right here. It's right here. Yeah.
Pharaoh answered and said, I have no need of him. I have created myself. And if you say that he causes dew and rain to descend, I have the Nile, the river that has its source under the tree of life, and the ground impregnated by its waters bears fruit so huge that it takes 2 asses to carry it, and it is palatable beyond description, for it has 300 different tastes.
So Pharaoh says, you think that's cool? I have the Nile. That Nile is mine. And that's one of the things pharaohs believed, was that they, that was their source of life. And according to the Torah, the Nile is that river that comes out of the Garden of Eden. So it's not like he's making that up, but let's just see what the Pharaoh really has.
Then Pharaoh sent to fetch the books of the chronicles of his kingdom from his archives, wherein are recorded the names of all the gods of all the nations, to see whether the name of the God of the Hebrews was among them. He read off the gods of Moab, the gods of Ammon, the gods of Zidon. I do not find your God inscribed in the archives. Moses and Aaron exclaimed, Oh, you fool, you seek the living in the graves of the dead. These which you read are the names of dumb idols, but our God is the God of life and the King of eternal life.
Yeah. Meanwhile, though, the Pharaoh still doesn't seem to know that. So the Pharaoh doesn't know, maybe because the people really don't know. Like nobody really knows yet. This is God kind of making God's debut on the world stage, if you will. What's interesting is that Pharaoh goes, I've never heard of this God. I've never heard of it. There's no record of this God. Here's these other gods that we know of. I don't see your God listed here. And of course, he goes to gods in the area of Israel. Moab and Ammon are on the east, and Sidon is the north in modern day Lebanon. I don't see your God listed here on this list of national gods. I don't see him listed. And so they say that's because God is not one of those gods. And this wonderful thing, you don't look for the living in a graveyard. And here's Pharaoh.
When Pharaoh said the words, I know not the Lord, God himself made answer, saying, Oh, you rascal, you say to my ambassadors, I know not the strength and power of your God. Lo, I will make you to stand for to show you my power, and that my name may be declared throughout all the earth.
Yeah. So at that point, God says, yeah, you'll learn, Pharaoh. You'll learn. You're going to see what a real God does, and you're going to see it yourself. And again, this idea that Pharaoh looks through the lists.
Having searched his list of the gods of the nations in vain for a mention of the God of the Hebrews, Pharaoh cited before him the wise men of Egypt, and he said to them, "Have you ever heard of the name of the God of these people?" They replied, "We have been told that he is the son of the wise, the son of ancient kings." Then spoke God, saying, "Oh, you fools, you call yourselves wise men, but me you call only the son of the wise. Verily, I will set at naught all your wisdom and your understanding."
So what's that about? Like so some of the wise men of Egypt, assumingly again, some of them were named already. Balaam, Job, Jethro were all named as wise men previously. But these wise men, these people who the Pharaoh relies on, some of them replied, "Oh yeah, we know that God. He's the son of the wise, the son of ancient kings." What is that? Where does that even come from? Like, what is that even based on? What's the Midrash doing here? Anybody? Any guesses? Well, the Midrash might have just tipped its hand on what some of the ancients might have said about Judaism and Jewish theology. Because they just gave away what probably existed in the ancient world when Jews first started talking about God, meaning the Yud He Vav He name, the eternal Lord, Hashem, however you want to say the name. There were probably people in the ancient world who said this to the Jews, which is that your God is a new God. Your God is the son of the ancient gods. The reason is that even if your God is powerful, we've never heard of him before. We have no record of him before. Therefore, he can't possibly be old. You saying he's old doesn't make him old. If we've never heard of him, he can't be old. And so there is this theory that there was a time when the Jewish concept of the one God, even if we call God by that ineffable name, that there were people who thought that this was the son of another God. And that's just what we had to deal with. Now, we don't deal with it anymore because there aren't pagans anymore who talk about God this way. But there seems to be this idea that how old your God was indicative of how powerful or how wise your religion was, how much credibility it had. And you can't invent that. Some people embrace it. Look, there was a time when Zeus was a new god. We know that. We know it. We know it because in Greek mythology, Zeus is the son of Kronos. We know it. There's no issue. The Greeks accepted it, embraced it, and worshiped Zeus as the son of Kronos. He said, Kronos, yeah, he's a powerful god, but he's an old god. He's old. The new god is Zeus. And that's the god you got to get behind. He's Kronos' son, by the way. He's Kronos' son. He's got Kronos' power and even more so because he defeated Kronos. But they embraced it. Judaism couldn't embrace that. We couldn't embrace it because we couldn't have God, our God, being the son of another God, because that means there's more than one God. But it may mean that people saw it that way. It may mean that that's the only type of mythological structure that people could understand, which is that if you've got a God and we never heard about it before, he's the son of somebody else. You can worship him. We don't have an issue with you worshiping. If he's powerful, then you can worship him. We'll buy that. We're not going to buy that you have a God that nobody's ever heard of that you worship now. So we don't think anything about it. I mean, we accept as monotheists this idea that God was always there and God kind of, we, the descendants of Abraham, the descendants of Jacob, the followers of Moses, we all got behind this. But it may not have been that clear. And it may not have been as simple as that. And the Midrash might have just tipped that right there with this little dig on God put in the words of Pharaoh. Just keep that in mind. That is, you'll occasionally see those things in Midrash that are little indicators of what Judaism dealt with in an ancient period. All right. So that's God defending himself. He's not done yet.
Pharaoh persisted in his obduracy even after Moses and Aaron had performed the miracle of the rod. At the time when the two Hebrews succeeded in entering the palace, guarded as it was by lions, Pharaoh had sent for his magicians, at their head Balaam and his two sons, Jannes and Jambres. And when they appeared before him, he told them of the extraordinary incident, how the lions had followed the two old men like dogs and fawned upon them. It was Balaam's opinion that they were simply magicians, like himself and his companions. And he prayed the king to have them come together before him with themselves to test who were the master magicians, the Egyptians or the Hebrews.
Yep. And so again, we mentioned this before. There are these guys, Jannes and Jambres, who according to the Midrash are the sons of Balaam. But we have a whole kind of like legend, a source of legends about them. And they're in the Apocrypha. They're in, here's the issue. They're in, we assume that the Midrash assumes that they were there. I will tell you that they are explicitly mentioned. I think I said this before. If not, I'll tell you now. I think I did tell you. Yeah, they're in 2 Timothy. They're in the second book of Timothy in the Christian Bible. So they're mentioned by name. So at least in the Christian Bible, by the time of the Christian Bible, Jannes and Jambres, they're just mentioned. They, like, everybody knows who they are. You don't even have to give background on who they are. They are mentioned, and they're seen as magicians who are evil magicians. So it was well established by the Second Temple period that these two guys were powerful magicians. The Hebrew Bible simply says magicians. It does say that, doesn't name them. And of course, Balaam is not mentioned at all in the story of Exodus. When we meet him in Numbers, when we're already about to cross into the land of Israel. We meet him in the lands of Moab. But according to the Midrash, he made an appearance here. They liked this idea that he was practicing his wizardry for the Pharaoh. So here we go.
Pharaoh called for Moses and Aaron, and he said to them, "Who will believe you when you say that you are the ambassadors of God as you pretend to be, if you do not convince men by performing wonders?" Thereupon Aaron cast his rod to the ground, and it became a serpent. Pharaoh laughed aloud. "What?" he exclaimed. "Is this all your God can do? It is the way of merchants to carry merchandise to a place where there is none of it there. But would anyone take brine to Spain or fish to Akko? It seems you do not know that I am an adept in all sorts of magic." He ordered little school children to be brought, and they repeated the wonder done by Moses and Aaron. Indeed, Pharaoh's own wife performed it. Jannes and Jambres, the son of Balaam, derided Moses, saying, "You carry straw to Ephraim," whereto Moses answered, "To the place of many vegetables, thither carry vegetables."
So they were not impressed with his first trick, which was interesting because wouldn't God have known that they wouldn't be impressed with it? So the staff turning into a serpent. The Bible says that this is not in the Midrash. This is not just in the Midrash. It starts in the Bible, where this is a bad first wonder to do because they can do it. And the Midrash goes even further, which is that little kids could do it. Not just the magicians repeated it, but anyone can do it. Pharaoh's own wife came out and did it, and she's not even a magician. She did it. So they really, the Midrash goes even further. But interestingly, the Bible does set up this wonder to be something where, again, here's the old saying, if you will, a saying we don't say anymore, but to a place of vegetable, you carry vegetables. That's what people are. Is that really what people are doing? Well, let's see what happens, because the Bible does tell us this does happen next.
To show the Egyptians that Aaron could do something with his rod that their magicians could not imitate, God caused the serpent into which his rod had been changed to swallow up all the rods of the magicians. But Balaam and his associates said, "There's nothing marvelous or astonishing in this feat. Your serpent has but devoured our serpents, which is in accordance with the law of nature. One living being devours another. If you wish us to acknowledge that the Spirit of God works in you, then cast your rod to the earth, and if, being wood, it swallows up our rods of wood, then we shall acknowledge that the Spirit of God is in you." Aaron stood the test. After his rod had resumed its original form, it swallowed up the rods of the Egyptians, and yet its bulk showed no increase. This caused Pharaoh to reflect whether this wonderful rod of Aaron might not swallow up also him and his throne. Nevertheless, he refused to obey the behest of God to let Israel go, saying, "Had I Jacob Israel himself here before me, I should put trowel and bucket on his shoulder." And to Moses and Aaron he said, "Because you, like all the rest of the tribe of Levi, are not compelled to labor, therefore do you speak, 'Let us go and sacrifice to the Lord.' If you had asked for 1,000 people or 2,000, I should have fulfilled your request. But never will I consent to let 600,000 men go away."
So Pharaoh says, I mean, I don't care. Even if Jacob came here, I'd make him a slave, which is crazy because, of course, we already read in the Midrash that Jacob filled the rest of the Egyptians with like terror or amazement. They couldn't believe there was a guy this amazing as Jacob. I would have made him a slave too. And what's interesting, of course, about this is that Pharaoh says, "You're only talking this way because you're Levites, and you Levites don't have to do the work," which, again, it doesn't say that in the Torah, but we read already in the Midrash that the Levites kind of got out of doing the work. Just like they're special, they get to be the priests. They got to be special even when they were in Egypt. They didn't have to do the work. So here's the Levites kind of being called out for having it easier. And the Pharaoh then goes on even further, which is, maybe if you'd asked for a few people to go, I would have said, okay, but I'm not letting all of you go. And here's the crazy thing. Moses and Aaron don't come to him and say, we want the people to go and never come back, right? When they first come there, they say, we want to go and worship God for a few days, come back. So what's interesting about it is, of course, Pharaoh is shown to be stubborn, not just in his, well, of course, he doesn't want to give up the slaves. I mean, that's going to destroy his whole economy. That wasn't the initial ask. The initial ask was just let us go worship. We'll be back. We'll come back. So it reminds us, the Midrash reminds us that this was a test to some extent to show that Pharaoh had no intention of doing anything that God wanted, even a request that might have not really been that difficult. Though here the Midrash puts one line into Pharaoh's mouth, which we don't have, which is, well, maybe if you had asked for a few thousand people to go, maybe I would have let you. I'm not letting everybody go. I'm not letting 600,000 guys go. So that's Pharaoh. That's like a deeper explanation for what Pharaoh does here, which is he refuses to give any ground. He won't allow the people even to pray for a few days. He won't let them go out on a festival, which of course, begs the question, well, what if he did? What if he had let them go for a few days? Then what would have happened? Because again, the goal isn't to go for a few days. It's to leave and never come back. But of course, Pharaoh it's showing us, the Torah tells us that Pharaoh would not even let the people have 3 days of freedom. All right. Of course, that's not all Pharaoh does. Doesn't just say, I'm not going to let you go. Here's what he does. And this is the part we're going to finish with today.
Besides refusing to dismiss the children of Israel, he ordered on the very day of Moses and Aaron's audience with him that the people be required to deliver the prescribed tale of bricks, though the taskmasters were not, as heretofore, to give them straw to make brick. Another decree was that the children of Israel were not to be permitted to rest on the Sabbath, for Pharaoh knew that they used the leisure for reading the rolls that described their redemption. All this was a part of God's plan. The oppression of Israel was to be increased the closer the end approached. As they wandered up and down the land of Egypt, gathering the straw they needed for the due tale of bricks, they were maltreated by the Egyptians if they caught them on their fields. Such unkind acts perpetrated by the whole people made it impossible for them to cast the entire blame for the bondage of Israel upon Pharaoh. All the Egyptians showed cruelty to the Israelites on their straw foraging expeditions, and therefore the divine punishment descended upon all alike.
Yeah. So if we read nothing else today but this paragraph, that would be enough. Dayenu. And I'll tell you why. Because this paragraph unlocks one of the keys to understanding redemption. And I'm spending less time looking at the Torah, if you notice today, and that's for a reason. This happens to be the Torah portions we're going to be reading this week and next week. So tomorrow night, when we do our Wednesday night Torah study class, we're actually going to look at Exodus, Shemot, chapters 1 through 6, the first part of this last couple months that we've been reading in Midrash, from the time that Moses is born, literally, until this part is all in this week's Torah portion. Next week, we get to Moses and Aaron coming before Pharaoh. This, what we just read, we're just got into. So all of that is in one Torah portion. Moses' birth, Midian, coming back to Egypt, burning bush, all that stuff is there in that first chapter. Most of it's actually the burning bush. I mean, the longest part of it, I would say the most of it, the biggest section is the burning bush. It's longer than his birth narrative. It's longer than his time in Midian, all of that. Burning bush is longer. And then next week we start reading in Vayera, next week's portion, and in Bo, we read about Moses and Aaron before Pharaoh and the plagues. And what we just read, what Rosemary just read for us, was this really powerful line that the oppression, the experience of being slaves in Egypt got worse before the redemption. So it had been bad. It had been really bad. Not saying it wasn't bad. But the really bad period happened just before they got redeemed. And the Torah really does tell us that in a way, because it's after Moses and Aaron come before Pharaoh and say, let my people go, the first time, that Pharaoh then turns around and says, you know what? You're now going to gather the straw. You're not just going to build the cities, but now you're responsible. Before we gave you bricks, now you'll make your own bricks. And you'll be responsible for the same amount of construction, except now you have to do that. And so the Torah basically tells us, I mean, that's in the Torah. This whole part of now you have to go do your brick work, make your own materials, that's in the Torah. And of course, the takeaway is that, yes, it got worse. That alone, you don't need a Midrash to tell you it got worse. But what's interesting about the Midrash is that it does something here very powerful, which is it tells us that what that meant when the Israelites went out and had to get their own bricks was that made the Egyptians every Egyptian became complicit in their torment. Because when they were working for the Pharaoh, you can make the argument that it was all on the Pharaoh. Only the Pharaoh should have been punished. But what the Midrash just did here was it said no. And you can make the argument, well, yeah, the Egyptians were all complicit because it's their Pharaoh and they didn't revolt against their Pharaoh and they allowed it to happen. But you could also say, well, what were they supposed to do? I mean, what was the average Egyptian supposed to do? Maybe their life wasn't much better. But what the Midrash just did is it said, no, the Egyptians were responsible too. And it wasn't just the Egyptian soldiers who went and killed those Israelite babies when Moses was a little tyke. It's these Egyptians right now, the Egyptians who are about to get hit with the plagues. And so if you wonder, did they deserve to have the plagues? The rabbis just said, yeah, they absolutely did. Because what they did was, when the Israelites would go out and get their straw, they would harass them, they would beat them while they did it. And so that meant that they deserved to be punished as a whole, as a group. Which again, it begs the question of, like, who do you punish? Does everybody get punished? Does all of Germany get punished? Just the Nazis? Just the Wehrmacht? Just at what point is the collective responsibility on the whole country? And so the Midrash here tells us that in the Egyptian case, it was on everybody, because there was this point where the average Egyptian took to beating and making life impossible for them, because this was something that the Egyptians made even worse. The average Egyptian made even worse. So this is a really powerful Midrash which tells us the average Egyptian essentially deserves the punishment that's about to befall them. I will point out too that, again, the comparisons to the Holocaust during this study are obvious. You know, the persecution of the Jews as Egyptians under the Egyptians. We always at Passover, we're drawn back to that. Almost every Passover, at some point, we think about that. We think about what it was like to be a slave, not just 3,000 years ago, but 70, 80 years ago, what it was like to be a slave, 80, 75, 80 years ago. And we also remembered that during the Holocaust, the worst period of the Holocaust, the time of the greatest destruction of human life, was just before it ended. The last years, it was really 42, 43 to 45. The last 2 years were the most destructive years on the Jewish community. That's where most of the Jews of Poland and most of the death camps were in operation those last couple of years of the war. And we know the entire Hungarian Jewish community virtually was wiped out in the last 6 months of the war. I mean, the Hungarian Jews had survived for the most part. 500,000 Hungarian Jews were killed in that winter to the spring as the Nazis knew that the war was over. So in some cases, the death happened at a accelerated rate as the war was coming to an end. I mean, Anne Frank, according to what we know, died a couple of weeks before the liberation of the camp that she was at. So this does happen, that it gets darker before the dawn. And again, it's difficult this year not to think about what's happening right now in the rate of death that's happening right now in our country, in our communities, as vaccines are being rolled out. I mean, people are literally being vaccinated while other places are being completely decimated. It's very hard to read this Midrash right now without thinking about the fact that even as we enter this, what we hope is the home stretch, there's a lot of people that aren't going to make it. So, as I said, if we read one thing today that sticks with us, it's this Midrash that it got worse before it got better, and it got real worse during this last time. So of course we get to the question of how long did this last for, right? We don't want it to last very long, obviously, for the Israelites, for us. How long does this really horrific period of their bondage last for? Well, here's what it says.
This frightful time of Israel's extreme suffering lasted 6 months. Meantime, Moses went to Midian, leaving Aaron alone in Egypt. When Moses returned at the end of the reign of terror, 2 of the Israelite officers accosted him and Aaron and heaped abuse upon them for having increased the woes of their people rather than diminished them. They spoke, saying, "If you are truly the ambassadors of God, then may he judge between us and Pharaoh. But if you are seeking to bring about the redemption of Israel on your own account, then may God judge between you and Israel. You are responsible for the widespread stench now issuing from the Israelitish corpses used as bricks for building when our tale was not complete. The Egyptians had but a faint suspicion that we were waiting for our redemption. It is your fault if they are fully conscious of it now. We are in the quandary of the poor sheep that has been dragged away by a wolf. The shepherd pursues the robber, catches up with him, and tries to snatch the sheep from his jaws, and the wretched victim, pulled this way by the wolf and that way by the shepherd, is torn to pieces. Thus Israel fares between you and Pharaoh."
Wow. So this is what the Israelites said to Moses and Aaron. Well, in this case, it says Aaron was left by himself. We don't get that in the Torah, that Moses ever left. But this idea that Aaron felt the abuse is pretty wild. Well, let's read who these people were in particular.
The two officers that spoke these stinging words were Datan and Aviram, and it was neither the first nor the last time they inflicted an injury upon Moses. The other Israelitish officers were gentle and kind. They permitted themselves to be beaten by the taskmasters rather than prod the laborers of their own people put under their surveillance.
Yep. So here we have this midrash that Datan and Abiram, again played by Edward G. Robinson in the movie, based on the midrash, right? Based on this midrash that Datan and Abiram, we don't read about them until later on, until they lead this revolt against Moses. But in the midrash, you can see, and this is what DeMille did. He based that character of Robinson, Edward G. Robinson's character, Dathan, as they called him. They based it on the midrash. He completely used the midrash. I mean, he says he used the midrash, DeMille. He's completely open about it. But this idea of putting a character who we see later on as being a problem is a problem earlier, before they even leave. It's a great device, and the midrash did it thousands of years ago, which is, yeah, these guys were really bad always, and they were always bad. They were always undercutting Moses and Aaron. They were always causing problems. And here's the crazy thing about them. Their job was to oversee Israelites. They were kapos. They were people whose job it was by the Egyptians to inflict work on those people. They were the Israelite officers. They were the Israelite taskmasters. And what's, of course, fascinating about that is that we have this idea that some of them were really creepy, like Datan and Abiram, but some of them weren't. Some of the people took the beatings themselves rather than put it on the other people, put it on their workers. They took it. That's what, the good officer would have done, but not Datan and Abiram. They literally took it out on Moses or on Aaron. And again, this wonderful image that they use is of a sheep being pulled apart by the wolf and by the person that's trying to protect them. So obviously Moses and Aaron are the shepherd here in this analogy, but Pharaoh's the wolf, but it doesn't matter. The sheep's going to die. And according to this midrash, as we read before, during this time when it got really, really bad, the Israelites had to use their own babies as bricks. We read this already. This isn't the first time we read this. Was that they literally had to put in their own children as bricks. So it's horrific. I mean, it's a nightmare. It's a horrible nightmare. The imagery that is used in these midrashim, which is, that's how bad it got, that human beings were used as brick. Not the only time we've seen it, by the way, right? Because we had human beings as brick back in the Tower of Babel a long time ago. So using people as the brick themselves, it's just this horrible nightmare of what people who have not even reduced people to animals, reduce them to inanimate objects. It's terrible. So again, according to this midrash, the Egyptians always suspected the Israelites would be on their way. You've now made it clear that we're on our way. They always knew that this day was coming. And now you've told them outright it's here. That's why they hate us. So here's what this is, interesting midrash. We're going to finish with this part. These two paragraphs. Yep.
The cruel suffering to which his people was exposed caused Moses to speak to God thus: I have read the book of Genesis through, And I found the doom in it pronounced by the generation of the deluge, pronounced upon the generation of the deluge. It was a just judgment. I found also the punishments decreed against the generation of the confusion of tongues and against the inhabitants of Sodom. These too were just. But what has this nation of Israel done to you, that it is oppressed more than any other nation in history? Is it because Abraham said, whereby shall I know that I shall inherit the land? And you did rebuke him for his small faith, saying, know of a surety that your seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs. Why then are not the descendants of Esau and Ishmael held in bondage too? Are they not likewise of the seed of Abraham? But if you will say, what concern is it of mine? Then I ask you, why did you send me here as your messenger? Your great, exalted, and terrible name is feared in all the earth. Yet Pharaoh heard me pronounce it, and he refuses obedience. I know you will redeem Israel in your own good time, and it is of little moment to you now that they are immuring living Israelites in these buildings.
Yep. So again, let's assume again that this is horrific, really horrific, that human beings are being put into buildings as brick. Slavery has been going on. I know, God, that you foretold this would happen. You told Abraham this. And Moses asks this wonderful Jewish question. God, why didn't you pick somebody else? Why did you choose us? Why? So the question that Moses asks here is the question that Jewish people have asked for thousands of years. What are we being punished for? And Moses says, I concede. I know you have reasons to punish people. You punished the generation of Noah. You punished the people of Babel. You punished the people of Sodom and Gomorrah. I get it. I see. I know. What did we do? And the rabbis throw out, well, maybe it's because Abraham didn't have faith that he was told that his descendants would be slaves. That's a fair question. The rabbis ask it knowing the answer. Maybe Abraham did something that deserved his descendants to get punished. But then they challenge that. Okay, Ishmael, the Muslims, the Arabs, they're descendants of Abraham. Why don't they get punished? And the descendants of Esau. Esau is Abraham's grandson, just like Jacob was. Why is he not punished? Esau is the ancestor of the Romans and the Christians. So the question here, why aren't Christians and Muslims punished? Why are we punished? If you're going to punish the descendants of Abraham, punish them all. Don't just punish us. You said you were going to punish Abraham's descendants. Fine. Why us? Why us? And this is the question that exists through all of time. Why us? Here's the answer the rabbis give to their own question.
Were he a God of justice only, the Lord would have slain Moses for the audacity of his last words. But in view of his having spoken as he had, only out of compassion with Israel, the Lord dealt graciously with him. He answered Moses, saying, you will see what I will do to Pharaoh, words conveying to Moses that although he would be witness to the chastisement of Pharaoh, he would not be present at that of the 31 kings of Canaan. Thus he was rebuked for the unbecoming language he had used in addressing God. At the same time, God's words were a rejoinder to another speech by Moses. He had said, O Lord of the world, I know well that you will bring your children forth from Egypt. Oh, that you would make use of another instrument, for I am not worthy of being the redeemer of your children. God made answer thereto, yes, Moses, you are worthy thereof. Through you, my children will be brought forth out of Egypt. You shall see what I will do to Pharaoh.
So, does he answer the question?
No, he doesn't.
And he, of course, uses this opportunity. or the rabbis do, to remind us that that Moses didn't have faith, and Moses didn't want to do this. And Rosemary actually made the point. It's not just Moses saying, I'm not really up to the task. Moses was pretty forceful in saying, pick somebody else. I don't want to do it. It's not a little bit. Moses was very clear, I don't want to do it. And according to this scene, we revisit that idea, which is that Moses really didn't want to do it. Moses gets punished here a little bit because here, well, not a little bit, but it gives us another reason why Moses doesn't get to come to the land of Canaan. Moses gets to see Pharaoh get punished, but it seems as though God also kind of at this moment also says he won't take the Jewish people into the land of Canaan. He won't be there when Joshua defeats those 31 kings of Canaan. He won't be present there for that because, again, he doesn't have enough faith. He's still questioning his role here. He still doesn't get it. And so here's the real weird answer here, which is the answer that you can make what is the answer that the rabbis give for why the Jews? Why the Jews? Why the Jews? Because it's through the Jewish people that God manifests his power. God will be redeemed and God will be acknowledged through the Jewish people. That's it. It's not a great answer. It's not an answer you and I maybe want to hear. But it is an answer that the rabbis come up with for why the Jews over and over and over again. Every time the Jews suffer, every time the Jews have to deal with anti-Semitism and prejudice and death, it's because God will show his power through us, through our suffering, and then our redemption. That we're the guinea pig, if you will, that God's gonna prove his power by helping.
But God is so slow.
Yeah. And it's an answer that it's not done well in the modern world. It's why it's why a theologian wrote a few years ago, the book, after Auschwitz, which is how do modern Jews and how do modern people of faith make sense of God now? Because in the ancient world, a God that redeems people and it takes hundreds of years. Well, it takes hundreds of years to get, a river navigable, right? We don't wait for God anymore. We don't wait for anything anymore. But it's also this idea that we can't accept a God. We don't have a God for the most part, most of us at least, not in the non-fundamentalist world. We don't have a God that will allow to have complete control over every aspect of our lives. I mean, to say that we're completely out of control here. If we're pawns in this game, that's not a game, but if we're pawns in God's work, then so be it. But that also assumes that we don't have a lot of power and a lot of ability to do a lot of things. We take for granted what is freedom, what is living in a world where we believe that people are inherently free, and thank God we live in a country where freedom is considered to be a right and is considered to be a protected and fundamental part of who we are as a country. But if you're a slave, if you're a peasant, if you're in a hierarchical structure where you just play your role as a cog. Hey, being told that you're part of God's plan, I would say it's not totally out of the realm of, I can dig that, I can be a part of that, but we can't do that anymore. We will not accept a God that we completely put ourselves under the mercy of and say, well, I get to be part of God's plan. Most of us don't want to hear that. I don't know many people that want to hear that. Our ancestors.
It seems like pie in the sky. Slaves, pie in the sky.
Yeah, but we don't. It's so different from our of what we expect out of life. That when we are told, now you're part of a plan, at least you're part of that plan, that could be comforting. I don't find it comforting. That's why it's not a theology I subscribe to, but I see it everywhere. And it's part of Jewish theology. It's part of the Midrash. It's part of Orthodox belief to this day. It's one of the things that makes me really upset when I talk to people in that community who can accept the Holocaust as part of God's plan. So I will tell you that it does work for people. It doesn't work for me. It doesn't work for most people who want to live as free, independent beings who have a lot of power over their destiny. To go back to that kind of, but you're not really, it's all faded and it's all kind of, that's what your role is. This is not as disastrous. So when we read it today, we read it and go, oh, that's horrific. What the rabbis are saying here is a legitimate question. Why us? They just gave an answer. We didn't see the answer because we don't believe that answer. We don't live with that answer. But our ancestors did. Our ancestors completely accepted that Moses was maybe out of sorts. Now, again, it's not that they can't imagine it, because they wouldn't have said it if they didn't imagine it. But Moses's essential question here isn't whether that type of situation is just. It's just, why us when everyone else isn't getting punished? We see it even deeper than that, which is, why does anybody suffer who doesn't deserve to suffer? But they didn't have it. They didn't see it that way. Usually they didn't really ask those questions in the same way that we do. I think maybe because, again, life was not great. Not that we live in a perfect world today, but the idea that you're consigned to a certain destiny, that you really don't have any power over your life, isn't something that most of us are willing to accept. I don't need to tell you, but if you were a woman, it was even worse. It's so foreign to some extent for us today that when we read the Midrash, we actually miss the point, which is that, no, they honestly think that God answered the question right now. They actually think that God answered it, which is that Moses isn't seeing the bigger picture, which is that it's us because that's our responsibility, but it's part of what our destiny is. It's what we do. So, not real comfortable for most of us today. I wish I could I wish I could finish off on a happier note, but actually the next paragraph we'll pick it up here next week. But the next part is not quite as we have to kind of get to the end of this to get to the happy part. But it's not, the whole discussion of our lives in Egypt it's not a happy time, right? It's not a good example of what we'd really like to see happen. But it's our attempt at understanding why we suffer. And again, you can make the argument that it's very relevant to us today. Again, we hope that this is the darkest period. Let's hope it doesn't get any darker the coming weeks. So that, please everybody stay healthy and safe. And it's good to see you all in the new year. And we will be here next.
Rabbi Mark, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
It's Sandy.
Hey, Sandy.
Okay, so I've been on and off like 3 times. Well, we heard this big kaboom. I sent you a picture to your email. A car totally smashed into the back of our property and took part of a
Oh my gosh.
electric
Oh,
pole
wow.
down. And
Do you mind if I
so
share
there are
it?
fire trucks and everything. I have no electricity, so I had to go on my phone.
I'm
But
sharing it right
the
now. Do you see
person,
it? Do people see it?
I just,
Oh my.
Oh,
Where is that, Sandy?
we live in Sand Canyon and Oak Bluff Road.
Oh my.
Across the street from Live Oak Springs. She either was coming up Sand and somebody came out of, we're not quite sure.
Is the
Is
person
she okay? Do you know?
I walked across
They're
the
okay?
street. They took her away in an ambulance, but Jim said she was okay. So I think he walked over and spoke to her. But yeah, it's been a little exciting this morning, but I
Oh
didn't
my
miss
gosh.
the rush, just a
No,
little bit.
I
Trying to
kept
figure out what to get on with.
kept letting you in and out. I thought maybe you had some calls. Oh man. Well, let's hope everybody's okay, and let's hope you get your power back. That is a piece of work right there. That is going to be a.
It's going to be a while.
Yeah, let us know. By the way,
Yeah,
Sandy,
well,
let us know if you need anything, and let us know if let us know when you're back online with your electricity, Sandy.
Thank you. I will. Thank you so much.
Good luck to you, Sandy.
All right, everybody. Not more excitement. All right, everybody. Stay
See
healthy.
you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow
Bye-bye.
night. Reading Shmot, reading Exodus, everybody. Take
Bye-bye.
care. We'll see you.